You're listening to Indications by the Conference Board.
Hello, my name is Margaret Murphy, Webcast Manager at the Conference Board Europe, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to this edition of Indications podcast, a series brought to you by the Conference Board. Today I will be sitting down with Senior Economist Ilaria Maselli to discuss the latest data on consumer confidence in Europe. The Global Consumer Confidence Index that we at the Conference Board manage together with Nielsen takes the temperature of consumers with 32,000 households surveyed in 64 markets around the world. It gives insights around consumer sentiments with a number of sub-questions in relation to job prospects, their personal income, spending intentions, but also households' concerns, as well as initiatives to save or spend more. In this episode, Ilaria and I discuss the background of the index, key findings for Europe for the fourth quarter of 2019, and how business leaders can best leverage these quarterly numbers going forward. Good morning, Ilaria, and welcome. First of all, can I ask you to give us a quick overview of the results?
Hello, Margaret. Hello, everybody, and thank you for having me today. So let's start with some numbers here. And what I can tell you to start is that confidence in the euro area was unchanged compared to Q3. So it's currently standing at 89. Whereas it decreased by 2 points from 88 to 86 in the broader Europe region, which counts 34 countries.
Okay, and so what does that mean, Ilaria?
Very good question. An index lower than 100 means that there are more pessimistic than optimistic consumers in the economy. And this is what we see in Europe, in Latin America, and now also in Africa and the Middle East. Whereas globally, the average is 107, so it means that there are more optimistic than pessimistic consumers. And this number, 107, was unchanged from Q3.
Right, the numbers all sound very positive, right?
Correct. Yes, this is still a very high level of confidence that we see. But there are some buts that we put there also in the report that we just published. And one thing is that we see an increasing concern over job prospects. This increased in Q4, and this is the case globally, but also in Europe and in the euro area as well. And in a way, I think the perception of households is correct, because if I look at the hard data of job creation, this has in fact been slowing down lately. Then there is another but, is the fact that in 3 large euro area countries, so Germany, Spain and Italy, there is an increasing share of households that think that their country is in recession right now. And so I think the main message that we have from the report this quarter is that it was really consumers and domestic demand that kept the economy afloat in 2019. But it's a big question mark whether that will be the case in 2020. So I think if we want to make sure that we see growth in 2020, we have it's really up to businesses and governments also to do their part, not to leave the economy really in the hands of consumers only, because that might not be repeated again.
So are you your recession fears? That's what you're talking about there.
Correct. So let's make it clear. In our outlook, in our global economic outlook, we say that growth at a global level, but also in the euro area as well, will be stronger in 2020 compared to 2019. So we are slightly more optimistic than what we saw in the consumer confidence, as I just said, but also in another survey that we have. It's called the C-Suite Challenge Survey. So every year around September and October, we survey C-suite executives and CEOs, and what we found this time is that out of a long list of concerns that CEOs might have in 2020, they put as number one the recession risk. So even though we really don't expect a recession to materialize anytime soon, this is really in the head of consumers as well as in the head of CEOs.
Very interesting, Ilaria. Are there other parallels between the Consumer Confidence Index and the C-Suite Challenge Survey?
Yes, I actually spotted another one. So if you remember, when we discussed the results for Q3, I pointed out the fact that an increasing number of households put as their top one concern in some European countries, especially France and Germany, I remember, global warming. And when I saw the results from the C-Suite Challenge survey, I noticed that concerns over climate change are ranking this year higher compared to last year. And this is especially true in Europe, in fact.
Right, okay. So going back to consumers, Ilaria, tell me something about the large euro area countries, if you would.
Yes, so I'll start with the biggest one, Germany. We saw a decline in Germany, and this was driven by a decline in spending intentions and job prospects. And if you put that in context, it kind of makes sense because the countries went in 2018 and 19, in fact, through a very strong slowdown, and the manufacturing sector is struggling. So the feeling is that the low business confidence is now being passed to the consumers. Italy also saw a small decline, and the index is currently at 70. Now, this really makes it clear that Italy is home to the most pessimistic consumers of Europe, and perhaps rightly so, because the economy is stagnating and there is also very tense political debate. Spain also saw a decline, and this is probably driven by the combination of the fact that the economy has been slowing down, even though, just to be clear, Spain is still one of the fastest euro area countries in terms of economic growth. But still, there's been a slowdown, and there's been 2 elections last year, and so maybe people are wondering, okay, can we go through with the relative political instability? Now they form a government, but we know it has a very small majority. In France, confidence went up in Q4, and probably this is because France is more insulated from the trade tensions compared to countries like Italy and Germany that are much more exposed. But I wonder if this will stay, because the survey was taken just before the long strike against the pension reform. So right. I wonder if we might see a decline in confidence in the first quarter of 2020.
Right. Okay. And what about outside the euro area, Ilaria?
So I'll look quickly at the largest country, and then I want to say something on Sweden because it's very interesting. So confidence went down in Turkey a little bit. It was driven down the concern over personal finances. And this may actually continue because the loose monetary policy may push up inflation and therefore have an impact on the purchasing power of households. So let's see the next quarter. There was a large decline also in Russia, but probably we might see a rebound soon, because in this case the lower interest rate just passed by the central bank might give some relief to households because they will pay less for their debt.
Okay.
In UK instead, confidence went up, and I think it's probably the electoral promises that pushed confidence up, but it's a question mark whether this will stay, because now the hard part comes with the post-Brexit negotiation and the fact that the business cycle is very mature. And then Sweden, that I wanted to mention, because we see a large decrease throughout 2019, and in Q4 the decline was driven by the concern over job prospects and spending intentions. And so there is something changing in the perception of people on the economy, and this is in a way consistent with the fact that forecasters actually also expect unemployment to increase. So there is a major change in the mood and something happening in the economy that you can really, really see in the numbers on consumer confidence.
Interesting. Okay. Ilaria, what about the products and goods that consumers are more likely to spend on or not spend on?
Well, there is an interesting question in the survey. It doesn't enter the index, but it gives additional information on, in fact, spending intentions. And so the question is, compared to this time last year, which of the following actions have you taken to save on household expenses? And then there is a very long list of items, holidays, bills, and technology products, for example. And there is a couple of things I noticed that are interesting. One is the fact that clothes are a very volatile item. So whenever people have a little bit more money, they're likely to spend it on clothes, but when they have to save, they also save it on clothes. So this was something I noticed in the last quarters. And then there is something else. There is another item, which is use my car less. And then there is another question related to that. So the question that comes after that one is, when economic conditions do improve, which of these do you expect you will continue to do? And then you have the same items. And what I notice is that use my car less comes again in some countries. So it's very high in the list of items that people saved on in the last year in France, Germany, and Italy. It's kind of peculiar to some European countries. And then it's the same countries that come back. So people say, okay, even if the economy improves, I'm going to use my car less, continue to use my car less.
Okay, so worth waiting for next quarter results to see if there's a trend there.
Right.
Ilaria. Yeah, okay. What are the biggest concerns for Europeans in the coming months? What are the European consumers anxious about? Issues in the spotlight, so to say?
A lot of things. Let me start with the Europe-wide list of concerns. So the first one is the economy. And again, all in all, consumer confidence is high, but you see that people are afraid of recession. They put economy as a very high concern, so that is why we should be careful in the next quarters to see where this goes. Then there is health. Health is not an equal concern across different countries, but I see it's very, very high in Russia and some Central and Eastern European countries. The other concern that is recurrent is job security. And this is actually highest in the Club Med countries. So in Italy, Spain, and Greece, this is a very high concern, and it's rightly so. Perhaps these are the countries where the unemployment rate is highest in Europe. And then there is another concern in about half of the countries, of the European countries, increasing utility bills. It's a bit of a headache.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Ilaria. Unfortunately, our time is up for today. I would like to thank you all for joining us, and a big thank you to my guest, Ilaria, for sharing the latest insights on consumer confidence in Europe. I hope you enjoyed our podcast today. Please remember to subscribe to our Indications podcast series or explore the entire catalogue of podcast programming from the Conference Board by visiting our website at tcb.org/podcasts. Thank you and goodbye.
This has been Indications from the Conference Board.